Welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This week, we'll be talking about what was quite a good Spanish Grand Prix. I missed it live, but I watched the highlights, and the highlights, they were worth watching. And for Spain, fairly rare. Obviously, we'll start by talking about, obviously, the Aston Martin Red Bull controversy that kicked off the weekend. Aston Martin bringing upgrades that made their car look very similar to the Red Bull. Maybe not driving so similar, though, obviously. Aston Martin finishing down in 11th and 15th, while also both getting knocked out in Q1. However, one team that did bring some good upgrades was Mercedes, and they do seem to be able to, maybe not quite at the moment, not quite there with Ferrari and Red Bull, but definitely challenging them, especially in the first half of the race. Obviously, George Russell holding Max Verstappen back for quite a bit of it. Lewis Hamilton putting in a very, very good performance after he collided with Kevin Magnussen and dropped to the back of the field. We'll talk Red Bull and Ferrari, of course. Ferrari having another very, not poor race. Obviously, Leclerc retiring about halfway through, Sainz spinning off into the gravel, managing to recover to, I guess, what would have been fifth before he got a bit lucky with, obviously, Lewis Hamilton's car having a few issues right at the end. We'll also talk Red Bull, obviously, another 1-2 finish, another win for Max Verstappen. What can everyone else do to stop him at the moment? And we'll talk the team orders as well. Obviously, Perez being told to give the position up to Verstappen. We'll talk maybe whether that was fair, whether it wasn't, and whether that will continue, I guess, throughout the rest of the season, especially if we're seeing it so early. Obviously, there'll be other stuff we need to talk about as well. We'll be doing our predictions for the Monaco Grand Prix and looking at our predictions for the Spanish Grand Prix, and I've just seen my co-host Chinmay has said they're not very good. I personally cannot remember what we said. It was 2 weeks ago now, but hopefully the points can roll in, but it's not looking like they will. As I mentioned there, I've got Chinmay with me as always. How are you doing, Chinmay?
Yeah, not too bad. Pretty unexpectedly good Spanish Grand Prix. I just did not expect to have a good, probably expecting a snoozer, but it was a good race nonetheless. Yeah,
I mean, can you think of the last time? I guess last year's Spanish Grand Prix wasn't terrible, wasn't brilliant, but yeah, it was one of those like Hungary 2019 strategy races where Hamilton pit. But before that, maybe 2012, obviously, Pastor Maldonado's first win, or first and only win in Formula One, I think is the last time I could think of quite a good Spanish Grand Prix. I'm also here with Bethany. How are you doing, Bethany?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm lost for words in a way, because I cannot believe that I'm saying that this was actually a good Spanish Grand Prix. Like, it was really good. Like, I think the only bit that I can remember actually not being that interesting was the final 4 laps, and that's it. So, that was so from what I remember, that was a really good race just throughout, just for F1 in general. Just, not just for Spanish Grand Prix. So, I was really happy with that race.
Yeah, and it obviously helps, having those 3 teams up there. And our final guest, Katch. How are you doing, Katch?
I'm doing good, thank you. I do just want to say that before we went in for the Miami race, I was talking to people and saying that I was excited for the Spanish Grand Prix because it wouldn't have all the pizzazz. Somehow I was right. It was actually a really good race, and being there in person, it was really dramatic, a lot of cheering. Well, in person at our viewing, but
I was about to say, you got back from Barcelona
imagine.
Quickly.
Next year I might actually try and go. If the cars are going to be this good, the new 2022 cars, 2023 cars, might try and go to Spain because it's not that expensive.
Yeah, and I will give you permission this week to wax the record about Lando Norris. Obviously,
thank you.
Coming in 8th, and I'll just run through the finishes quickly. Max Verstappen taking his 4th win of the season, obviously 4th time finishing as well, 100% win record when he finishes. Sergio Perez in 2nd place. George Russell, a very good 3rd, continuing his top 5 finishing streak of finishing in the top 5 at all races. Carlos Sainz recovering from that early spin to finish 4th, as mentioned, as did Lewis Hamilton, recovering from the early contact with Kevin Magnussen to finish 5th. Valtteri Bottas consistent as the best of the rest in 6th place. Esteban Ocon, a very good performance, climbing from 12th to 7th. Lando Norris, a very, very good performance, 11th to 8th, but finding out after the race that he was diagnosed with tonsillitis that he had been suffering from, I guess, throughout the weekend, from what we saw there, but almost getting into Q3 by having his lap time deleted. Fernando Alonso recovering from last on the grid after taking a few grid penalties to finish 9th. Yuki Tsunoda rounding out the top 10 in 10th, obviously. Sebastian Vettel in 11th in the Aston Martin. Daniel Ricciardo dropping from 9th to 12th in the end. Pierre Gasly finishing 13th, obviously tangling with Lance Stroll throughout the race. Mick Schumacher in 14th, going for a two-stop strategy that maybe didn't quite work in the end, but qualifying in Q3 for the first time in his career. Lance Stroll in 15th. Nicholas Latifi finishing 16th or DNF, being one of his favourite positions. Kevin Magnussen never really recovered from that collision with Lewis Hamilton right at the start, which we will discuss. Alex Albon in 18th, started 18th, finished 18th. Guan Yu Zhou again retiring from the race, I think getting quite unlucky with engineering at the moment. And obviously Charles Leclerc being the first driver to retire from the race. We are going to get started with the Aston Martin Red Bull controversy that we saw at the start of the weekend. Obviously, Spain has traditionally always been a testing ground for new upgrades. I think McLaren bringing about 10. I think a lot of teams also bringing a few here. Obviously, first European race of the season, they've practiced there. The track is very, very unique in how it just has all of the sort of characteristics of the corner, fast sweepers, sort of slow corners, especially in that final chicane. So, we saw some upgrades here, and Aston Martin were accused by Red Bull of having a very similar car, weren't they, Chinmay?
Yes, it's now a green Red Bull. First it was the pink Mercedes, and now we have a green Red Bull, even though this time it didn't actually work. Because at least the pink Mercedes actually made the car very fast, whereas this green one wasn't exactly that fast, was it?
No. So obviously, Katch, the accusation from Red Bull is that the side pods do look very similar, and obviously this has some precedent because obviously Aston Martin taking some of the some Red Bull personnel last year, including Dan Fallows, who was the head of aerodynamics at Red Bull. So almost like you'd expect it if you were going to have something similar.
Exactly. If something was going to happen, then of course it would be Aston Martin that would. Because Lawrence Stroll is trying, quote unquote, to build up the team and to be something great. It's obviously taking people from every other team, and they've taken a lot from Red Bull, I think. So I'm not too surprised, but it's not really worked out. I see why Red Bull are pushing this forward. They don't want their designs being stolen, but then again, they're such a top team that there's no issue. I don't think Aston Martin will be able to beat them. We're not going to see Seb suddenly rise up the rankings and win the next race, I don't think.
I mean, Bethany, do you think that the fact that maybe it didn't work sort of exonerates Aston Martin a bit? Obviously, if it was just a copy, like, from design, from looking, as opposed to being like an in-depth copy with like the CAD designs, knowing how it was built, how it was made, then you'd expect it to have worked a lot more. But the fact that it hasn't maybe just suggests that Aston Martin were just looking at it at face value and trying to get the same benefits that the design clearly has given Red Bull.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right, yeah. The only thing is, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but apparently, from what I've heard, this has been worked on since November, so there's less of a... I'm not sure how to say it. I guess just it's less likely that they've copied from seeing the Red Bull. Yeah,
I heard that they were building two cars originally, which I don't believe, even though, yeah, they kind of wrote off the season. They did not write it off like Haas did. They did not write it off, I think, like Alfa Romeo did. You could still see them bringing little bits and bits of upgrades. So they might be covering their tracks by saying they built two cars, but it's so unlikely.
Yeah. I won't be surprised if it was just a genuine copy. I mean, I do not believe Aston Martin for a second there, to be honest. But
yeah, and I mean, obviously, as you were saying there, Chinmay, they have got a track record for it. Obviously, in 2020, they were accused of building a very, very similar car to the 2019 Mercedes. Obviously, they were docked 15 points and €400,000 for illegally copying the brake ducts after protests from Renault, which I think actually cost them a place in the Constructors' Championship in the end.
Lost in third place in the Constructors.
So there is precedent here, but it does seem like if they have copied it, and to be honest, the FIA have released a statement saying that it's within the rules, it's above board. Obviously now it is a show and tell system where all upgrades have to be declared with the FIA, who put out a press release. That's how we know what each team brings to the table now. If it has copied, then it clearly hasn't really worked. Obviously both out in Q1 and 11th and 15th in the race.
Yeah, it just does it. It's, I suppose, it's just a lot harder, especially since the crackdown the FIA has made when it comes to copying cars. It's just made it harder for teams to steal ideas from other people. Yeah, it's just not really worked out for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Katch, do you think that they might be able to improve it? Obviously, this is the first race of the new upgrades. Probably teams still dialing in what can or what does and doesn't work, and especially if you bring a load of upgrades as McLaren did, it's more likely that maybe one of them brings the car back while the other, well, it looks like it maybe hasn't put the car forward by a small amount, might have put the car forward a lot more. Do you think that Aston Martin maybe need a few races to dial in this new design, and that if they do, they can start to climb the grid?
I think so, because if the rumours are true and they did copy Red Bull in some aspects or a lot of aspects, then obviously from the first race they wouldn't be able to see everything. There's no way that within 5 races they were able to copy a car. That's impossible. I know that these F1 engineers are absolutely incredible people, but it's not possible. So I think it will take a few races. By the time we get to the midpoint of the season, we'll see where Aston Martin are. But then we also shouldn't just write it off that they've made good upgrades. I don't want to go back to McLaren, but they went from last to where they are now, like car-wise. And they didn't copy anyone, I don't believe. So, I don't know. Aston Martin could just be making really good jumps. But then, when you were talking about the upgrades, the first thing that came into my mind was Alpine.
Yeah, I think compared to McLaren, copyright infringement does not translate terribly well to Aston Martin's offices, but oh well.
Yeah, we're ignoring the McLaren old copyright stuff. Nah. But isn't the guy, I can't remember his name now, I'm really bad with names, but the guy from 2008 that was part of that scandal with McLaren, isn't he at Aston Martin at the moment? Is it Whitmarsh?
Something, I think
so. Well, I mean,
I believe he's at Aston Martin.
I mean, well, that wouldn't help their case, I guess.
No.
But
not at all.
Yeah, no, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Aston Martin, maybe as we've been saying, their upgrades didn't work quite so well here, but they might end up working a bit better in the near future, or maybe even at the next race, which is Monaco. Obviously, that sort of ends the pre-weekend discussion. Maybe something else. Obviously, Fernando Alonso, after Miami, given a 10 or 2 5-second time penalties to drop him out of the points, is very critical of the new race director and some of the decisions, or race directors, and some of the decisions that they've made over the first 5 races of the season. I mean, Katch, it was quite unprecedented how outspoken Alonso was. He got summoned to the stewards. I don't know if he got a penalty or not, or just a fine.
I don't believe he got a penalty. I think he just had a big talking to, like a fat talking to by the race director.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous comments. I can't remember a ton what happened, but yeah, I'm not surprised that it's Fernando that's too outspoken, but I think to be this critical so early on in the season is a bit harsh. Like, I've heard that the new race director is a very sucker for rules. Like, you could see, like, disqualifying some times in qualifying and in free practice and removing those times. So obviously he wants to stick by the rules, and Fernando's just got to be careful, because it will drop him out the points, especially when now the way that Alpine is working, he's seen as a quote-unquote second driver for upgrades. So he's got to be careful if he is serious about wanting this third world championship, which he keeps going on about.
Yeah, but obviously, Bethany, Alonso is the most experienced driver on the grid, coming onto the grid in 2001, which I actually think was before all of us were born, which is terrifying. But has been saying he's seen no improvements. And obviously, this came to a head as well, not just with what happened with Alonso in Miami, getting those 2 5-second time penalties, but also with the crashes that Sainz and Ocon had at turn 14, or at least the chicane just under the underpass, that while they didn't look severe, were apparently like quite severe, and the race director sort of downplayed the incidents, didn't add a tech pro barrier after the Sainz incident, and then Ocon had a same crash there which damaged his chassis. I mean, do you think that, obviously after last year we've seen how the race director can have a big impact on the championship, do you think that we've seen an improvement in the direction over the first 5 races?
Honestly, I think it's too early to tell, but there have been some moments of concern, as you've mentioned, in Miami with the barrier. I feel like the drivers and teams should definitely be listened to when it comes to safety, because obviously the teams have the drivers' best interests at heart when it comes to this as well, and just safety is paramount. We know this from many previous incidents. I hope that they do actually improve from what happened in Miami with the barrier, but
yeah, I think it is too early to say about this race director. They shouldn't be so critical. I think with last season, there was so much criticism on Michael Massey, some of it valid, some of it not, but maybe it's made the F1 fans and F1 teams, maybe, I'm going to say a bit too quickly to judge. Maybe they just want to jump on this bandwagon of, oh, we're going to criticise the race director, and see them as, compare it to football, people criticise the referee a lot for decisions, and maybe they're seeing it in a similar light of, we're just going to ambush this guy, when in fact he does want F1 to be a good sport. He wants it to be seen in the best regard. So the tech pro barrier thing, that was incorrect. Like, there should have been one installed, and he should be listening to the teams and the drivers. So give him a few races and see where he's at. But I think as time goes on, and maybe they start, like the teams and the race directors and the stewards, when they have a better relationship, maybe progress will be made that way.
Yeah, I think just not just that, these are brand new race directors. They're still trying to adjust to their new role in Formula One. So not just that, being a race director is one of the most difficult jobs in the whole sport, but you have to overlook literally everything. You've got 19 other cars to talk about. You've got to talk about marshal placing. You've got to be talking about how spectators are moving around. There's so many other bits and pieces you need to look at. And I mean, credit where credit's due, these race directors do an excellent job every single weekend. To the best, they do their absolute best. But like Bethany and Katch said, it's too early to tell whether really they're doing a really good job.
Yeah, there will be mistakes made, but I agree, and I think that as time goes on, we will see that these mistakes become less and less common, and let's be honest, it's still better than Massey was last year.
Ooh, controversial there. But we didn't really see any issues that were too bad at the Spanish Grand Prix, so obviously we will have to wait and see whether the race direction will be improved. And I think that, as Katch was saying, we've probably got to give it time for a bit. And we are going to move on to the race, and I guess the race weekend in general. As usual, we're going to go through it in a sort of team format, starting off with arguably the biggest improvers of the weekend, or at least what we saw from them last weekend, Mercedes. So obviously qualifying in 4th and 3rd and 5th. 4th and 5th?
No, I think it was 4th and 6th. 4th and 6th,
yes.
3rd was Sainz, 5th was Perez.
Yes, 4th and 6th. George Russell climbing up to 3rd after the start, and then climbing up to what ended up being 1st place after Leclerc's retirement, and Verstappen went off into the gravel. We'll discuss that, and Sainz going off into gravel later on, but climbing up to 1st, obviously then overtaken by he wasn't even overtaken by Verstappen pitting, Russell falling back a bit, overtaken by Perez in the end, and coming home for a solid 3rd place. Lewis Hamilton having an exceptionally unlucky race, obviously being or colliding with Kevin Magnussen on the first lap in an incident that we would say was more Magnussen's fault.
I think more Magnussen, he just got
Definitely.
too ambitious.
Yeah, like Hamilton didn't do anything wrong, I don't think.
Yeah, he didn't even oversteer, he just sort of turned and then Magnussen just turned
Magnussen
more.
just hit him.
Yeah. So obviously Hamilton falling to the back of the grid after a puncture, falling to 19th place, but making his way up to what would have been a very, very good performance, finishing 4th, ahead of actually a Ferrari, until he had issues right at the end of the race, having to give the position back to Sainz, and eventually finishing 5th. Chinmay, does this bode well for, maybe not Red Bull, because obviously you want as few little competition as possible.
Yes.
But does it bode well for the season as a whole that
Yes.
Mercedes are beginning to look maybe not quite challengers, but are beginning to look more like a 2017-18 Red Bull, in that they're there, but maybe they're not just quite there with the top 2 teams?
Yeah, 100%. I think. For my first, yes, I know I'm a Red Bull fan. I would prefer that as little interference as possible. We had literally next to no interference other than the whole DRS fiasco. But I think especially at least for the season, it'll be good to have at least a 3-team battle for wins at multiple points in the season. And seeing Mercedes now seem to have figured out how to calm their porpoising, it looks like it can be a good season from here on out.
Yeah, obviously, I'll come to you, Katch, now. Obviously, Mercedes there bringing upgrades that do seem to have not eliminated the porpoising issue, but at least have made it more comparable to other teams on the grid. In fact, being the fastest team down some of the straights in practice, maybe using higher engine mode, so maybe a bit less representative, but the fact is, maybe the fastest team by the end of the straights. Did you expect them to be this close? Obviously, we thought Miami, especially after Friday, that they might be up there, but it really looks like they've made a huge leap forward in terms of performance.
They definitely have. It is surprising. I didn't expect them to make this much of a jump. I will still argue that they're not there yet. I think everyone's going to say that, but they're not there for wins immediately. I think that is also due to the drivers. If they're fighting for wins, that's the drivers, not the car. At the moment, I still think they're the 3rd fastest car. But the improvements they've made are amazing, and going for the rest of the season, we will see this bigger battle. Maybe the Constructors and Title 5 maybe is a bit solid between the top 2, but it just shows that they've been able to eliminate it. And with the porpoising and the speed, I didn't expect them to be that quick. Their porpoising has been horrific. I think them and Ferrari, I believe, had 2 of the worst porpoising. And there was, I think it was midweek, this week or last week, the drivers were talking about how it was causing back issues, and especially George Russell, how it was severely hurting him. So it's good that they've been able to eliminate it. If not, something would have had to happen, because you can't have drivers getting injured due to just porpoising and the car being the way it is. But no, I think it's amazing to see the upgrades they've made, and it's only good for the sport. People criticising Mercedes, being really harsh on them, saying that it's good that they're now doing bad. You just want to see every team doing well. If we could have a 10-way title fight, that would be sick. I would love to see as many teams up there as possible. So there's no issue having more teams up there, no matter who you support, I think.
Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll focus on each driver in turn, starting obviously with George Russell. He's having, would you say maybe, Bethany, he's having the best season out of anyone on the grid, maybe with the exception of Max Verstappen?
It's difficult to say, to be honest, just because there's been times when Mercedes just hasn't. It's Mercedes in a bit of a world of its own in most races, where it's not with the midfield, but it's not with the top teams either. So it's a bit difficult to judge how the drivers are doing. But George Russell has certainly been the most consistent driver. He's just driven the most consistently well. He's got top 5 in all the races. Every race so far, he's got on the podium twice. It's just very consistent, and as a result, he's up there, just challenging for 3rd in the championship. And if Mercedes can really improve and potentially get into that title fight, I think that George Russell would be the one to be challenging for that title, not Hamilton.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there because, as you said, he is so consistent. I would definitely, I had to think about it, 100% agree. Max and George, two best drivers at the moment. And my reason for this is that George's consistency is similar to that of similar to that of Lando's last year. And if you think about it, everyone was saying that Lando was incredible last year at the start of the season, and George has had the same thing in also the third best car. So I think it's also because it's George that people don't particularly like his personality sometimes, that people may say he's not doing as well, but he is, and you shouldn't disregard him just because of the personality. It's like, his driving is phenomenal. He was able to battle Max in the race, and people were trying to claim that he's only missed a Saturday, that he's not there on the Sunday, but he is there. He is a really good driver, and now we've seen him in the same car as Lewis. No one can debate that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, Chinmay. Obviously, what Katch was mentioning there about how people I've always seemed to have the perception that people like George Russell maybe a bit less than Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris. I mean, why do you think that is, in a way?
I think probably since last year, ever since he probably knew he was going to miss it, I think some people may argue that he's developed a little bit of a chip on the shoulder, but I don't personally really think so. I think, and then especially owing to towards the end of last season, where he was almost very he was almost comparable to Latifi. Latifi was actually fairly close to Russell in a lot of the second half of the season in terms of race pace, and I feel like because of that, people expect that he would just get flattened by Lewis Hamilton. Especially, you see Lewis's form in Brazil, for example, last year, and just the next level he was racing at. So probably that's why people start to really just disregard Russell a little bit. But I think he just proved everybody wrong, being the only driver to finish in the top 5 all year. So
yeah, and I mean, this is obviously Lewis. We'll move on to Lewis Hamilton. Actually, obviously, had a very interesting race. Obviously, we mentioned before colliding with Kevin Magnussen, dropping to the back of the grid, but somehow, and I didn't really get this on the highlights, he just sort of ended up in 4th place. So, and had arguably probably the best drive of the grids, made no mistakes, and realistically the third turn or the lap 1 incident wasn't really his mistake that he made. Obviously, one drive of the day, which is very rare for Lewis Hamilton. He's never really been one to win driver of the day. I mean, without that collision, do you think he would have beaten George Russell on the grid, or
yes,
by the end of the race?
Yes, I think he would have beaten George Russell. The pace was running out. He wouldn't win the race because I think the Red Bulls were still much faster than the Mercs, but I think Lewis Hamilton could have definitely been on the podium if it wasn't for that incident. Yeah,
and I mean, Bethany, I'll go back to something you were saying about how George Russell would be the driver to challenge for the title if Mercedes were to put together maybe a race-winning car by midway through the season. I mean, do you think that, and I think that opinion is probably one that's maybe held by a few people at the moment, but do you think that Lewis Hamilton is just getting unlucky at the moment? Obviously, he's got now unlucky in Spain, he's got Australia, last race at Miami, or the first 2 safety cars, the third one, or a collision, the last one, that wasn't really his fault. Obviously, if he had those points, maybe if he would have finished ahead of Russell in Miami, in Australia, and if maybe it's a bit less clear cut here, but maybe in Spain as well. Do you think that is Hamilton just getting the unlucky to the lucky that I guess the relative luck that he got through his early years or middle years at Mercedes, when he really didn't have many retirements, was always sort of able to climb back up the grid? Do you think it's just the scales are evening out in a way?
A little bit, but you also make your own luck, and I feel like prior to Spain, Hamilton hadn't been doing that as much. He hadn't been bouncing back in a way as the way he did in Spain, and I think that, I'll be honest, I think that Hamilton, I'm not sure what it was, but it feels like something was up with Hamilton the first kind of 5 races in general. And I think that in Spain, we've got the old Hamilton back.
And obviously, there was something else that happened, obviously, in qualifying as well. Hamilton complaining that he was the only driver to sort of stick to the delta of the minimum lap time they could do before they started their laps. Obviously, that matters, because the faster you're going on your out lap, the quicker your tyres warm up, and then by the third sector, they might overheat. And it's interesting, you look at the delta times of the sectors. Hamilton, I think, losing half a second to Leclerc's final sector, when George Russell maybe only losing a tenth and a half, when Russell had gone, I think, about 8 or 9 seconds slower than I think the delta was allowed. And I think about 55 violations for delta times were given out during that qualifying. I mean, first off, Jim, do you think that that's part of the reason Hamilton was maybe starting a bit further back than George Russell? Maybe that's the reason, obviously, he then gets caught up with Kevin Magnussen in the first place. And do you think that it's fair that I think 2 drivers in the end, Esteban Ocon and Lewis Hamilton, were the only ones to stick to the delta and not get any violations, but realistically it has impacted on them when they played by the rules, but the other 18 drivers haven't played by the rules and have had maybe some benefit? I mean, do you think that's fair?
Not really, because they broke the rules to begin with. But yeah, I don't think the whole Delta thing impacted Hamilton all that much. I think just Russell had a better qualifying than Lewis Hamilton. I think they're both really on par in quality in terms of pure abilities. I think race pace, it just differs on the day, but yeah.
Yeah, I think with the Delta, I didn't even realise that many things, like violations, were given out. And I think that kind of shows that even though Hamilton and Ocon were the only ones to stick to it, what did it mean? What if the other 18 drivers, if they didn't stick to it, they got violations. Did they get penalty points? Did they get fines? Did they get time penalties? Or were they just in a better position and just had these violations on their record? I don't know. Like, you can say violations, but Hamilton and Ocon, if they were in a way penalised because they didn't stick to the Delta, or they stuck to the Delta and therefore were disadvantaged, it doesn't really matter. They were disadvantaged, and in the race they were in a worse position, like starting.
And I mean, do you maybe think, Bethany, there needs to be, obviously we've got the penalty point system, which is it's a very confusing one in how the points are awarded out. Do you think that to prevent, it's such a minor thing on the face of it, going a few seconds slower than the Delta, but realistically it can put you a place higher, which maybe puts you on the cleaner side of the grid or the dirtier side of the grid, and then you get a better start, you climb up 3 places, you don't get held up behind maybe a slower car. It's like one of those things where such a small thing can have such like a big butterfly effect. I mean, do you think that something, maybe there needs to be maybe more penalised, more of a penalty for not obeying the rules? Because especially when we're going so cut and dry in terms of stuff like the jewellery ban, and then seemingly being so like blasé almost on sticking to the Delta, which does in the end, or at least can, have a big impact. Do you think that it needs to be more strict? Maybe it's like, I don't know, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I'll be honest, just what is the point of having that rule if you can just get away scot-free by ignoring it? Just, the rules are there, but they need to be enforced. So there needs to be a reason for the drivers to follow it, in a way. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be one, and that's a problem.
I think we'll see next week if the Delta thing, if it really matters, because next week in Monaco is when I think we'll see the first challenge for the race director, because we're on Mercedes bringing up the jewellery thing. Next week is the first time that Lewis Hamilton may not be able to go out for practice because he may not remove the nose piercing. So if there's such a strict thing on jewellery and Lewis Hamilton can't go out in free practice one, he gets penalised for that. But then there should be penalised for Delta, because why are drivers getting away with that but they can't get away with jewellery? Like, this is the first challenge that I think we'll see the race directors face, and to see how, I don't know, see how the race directors and the stewards handle it will be very interesting, and I think it will set a massive precedent for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I guess we'll bring it back to Mercedes just to finish it off. Obviously, they've made now a very big jump from being a team that realistically were mixing it with the upper midfield. It's been fairly close, especially with Valtteri Bottas, who we'll come and talk about a bit later. And now they're very much mixing it with the top teams more so. Do you think that we'll see them grow as well? Do you think that, or grow even more? Obviously, there was always that feeling when Mercedes came in with a car that wasn't entirely perfect, that they would be the team that could climb up to making it perfect and making it able to challenge the Ferrari and the Red Bull. So, Chimay, do you think that will be the case? Do you think that Mercedes will end up with a car, especially now after we've seen a track record of improvement, to where they realistically can be challenging for podiums on pure pace alone? Do you think that we will start to see them challenge for races and race wins in the not too distant future?
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, but I think the thing we've got to factor in this year is the cost cap, whereas the previous times we've seen Mercedes not have the complete fastest car is when there wasn't a cost cap. Mercedes could pump literally hundreds of millions of dollars, whereas this year they're a lot more restricted, and I'm pretty sure they've already spent a significant chunk of their money solving the porpoising. So I think they'll be on the back foot in terms of money to at least invest in developing new parts in order to bring up to the front. But I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes did overcome that obstacle and actually start challenging for wins.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this will be a question to both of you, Katch and Bethany. Who do you think will be the first Mercedes driver to, I guess, take that race win, and maybe where as well? Obviously, we've seen the consistency of George Russell, only driver to have finished in the top 5 at all the races, but we've also seen that Lewis Hamilton had a very good performance in Spain, and has perhaps been getting a bit unlucky for the first few races of the season, which, if that starts to reverse, he'll be back to maybe his best. So where do you think that Hamilton or Russell is more likely to take a race win, and maybe where as well? Where do you think?
With the combination of you having mentioned about the Mercedes being very good in the straights, and just, I feel like Hamilton, he's got that experience, so I feel like he's going to be despite what I said earlier, I think that Hamilton's probably going to be the one to take Mercedes' first race win of the year. And I think it might, I don't think it's going to happen very soon, but I think it might happen in, say, Britain. Ooh. I think that Mercedes first, honestly, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if it ends up being a Mercedes Brit versus Brit battle for the win in the UK.
I was genuinely thinking the same thing. I've just got up the race calendar, and the next 5 races are Monaco, Azerbaijan, Canada, Britain and Austria. I don't think in Monaco or Azerbaijan that's too soon for Mercedes to actually get up there. But you get to Canada, Britain, Austria, you could see Mercedes up there challenging for the win. And as we saw this weekend with Perez and Verstappen, though George is doing incredibly, they'll favour Lewis. They want Lewis to get a race win this season. They want him to get one every season. So I feel like it will be Lewis, and because he's got that experience, maybe we'll see him perform better. Maybe George will crumble a little bit. I have faith in the guy. I think he's there for World Championships in the future. But at this moment, give him a bit more time in a Mercedes, give him a bit more time up front. Then later in the season he can get a win. But right now I think Lewis will be there when the car's there.
Oh, but looking at the weather forecast in Monaco,
oh, it looks like a thunderstorm.
Yeah, anything looks like it could happen.
Annoyingly, I can't watch it. I'm busy, but
no, it's gonna be a thunderstorm about 5 o'clock after the race is done. Let's be honest.
Well, we don't want to jinx it, and obviously we will come on to talk about Monaco and our predictions for it in a bit. We are going to talk about the 2 teams that we talk about every week. Obviously, they're the teams at the front of the grid. They're the teams that need to be discussed. It is Ferrari and Red Bull. Yep, that was the one. I almost said Mercedes again, and that would have been wrong again. Not yet.
Until next season.
No. Well, by the end of the season, it will be Ferrari and Red Bull. But we will see. Yeah, I know. I ignored it. I know. We don't question things. Well, it will be Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes by the end of the season. Nailed it.
What up?
Right. It was a race of contrasting fortunes for both teams, and we are going to start with Red Bull because arguably the more boring one.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen claiming his 4th win of. Actually, no. I've changed my mind. We're doing Red Bull we're doing Leclerc and Verstappen, and then we'll do Sainz and Perez. So Max Verstappen claiming his 4th win of the season. Probably because Leclerc retired, you'd have to say.
Yeah. Spain was going to be a runaway for Ferrari. Unfortunately, the Ferrari engine broke down. Bahrain 2019 all over again. So, but actually, no, that was worse than Bahrain 2019 because this time Leclerc didn't finish. But yeah, I think the thing is, both of them are drawing at the top of the game right now. Yes, we do see the odd mistake from both of them, but it's as close as a fight can be between the two of them right now, to be honest.
Yeah. And obviously you mentioned there we see the odd mistake, and we saw Verstappen for the first time cracking in a while, going off at turn 4 in what was a very very weird sort of period of the race where two drivers that are very highly regarded, Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen, making almost identical mistakes. Bethany, I mean, what was your sort of reaction when you saw that? Because it's not something we tend to ever see, like drivers at the front of the grid or even drivers in F1 making those sorts of like unforced errors, especially ones that have such high caliber as Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it was for Carlos Sainz. It was not as much of a shock, unfortunately, because of what happened, and what's happened in previous races, and I felt sorry for him in a way. But then when it came to Verstappen, it was a big shock, and I remember I was in the Clarendon with Warwick F1 Society, and I was thinking, who's going to be the next person to do this? In the end, there wasn't another person to do it, but yeah, it was just something just seemed to catch both of them out at the start of the race, and it's just difficult to tell what it was.
Was it something to attract temperatures, maybe?
Talk about the turn. We're talking about turn 4, right?
Turn 4, yeah.
Yes.
It was wind gusts.
Ah,
There was a very strong tailwind heading into that corner. So, and I think it just caught both of them at the wrong time.
That's fair enough. And obviously, first time we've seen Max Verstappen make a mistake in a long time, and it's going to be interesting to see now. Verstappen has retaken the lead of the championship, obviously gaining 25 points. Who got the fastest lap?
Perez
got the fastest lap, obviously. So Verstappen gaining 25 points, now ahead of Charles Leclerc in the championship. Do you think that at this point it will start to become a bit more 2021-esque in so far as when the drivers get close together? We might see some fireworks happen, especially because up until now, there's always been a fair gap between the two. Obviously, Verstappen having those 2 retirements in the first 3 races before Leclerc, I guess, has struck back with, I guess, a retirement here and obviously his error in Imola. Do you think that this title will become more 2021, or are we seeing one that is going to remain sort of civil at the moment, as civil as it has been for the moment?
I think it'll be. I think it won't be as intense as last year, but I'm hoping it does get very close like it did last year. I'm still going to maintain my theory that the first time those two are crushing is at Silverstone still, and Mercedes will take a 1-2.
Imagine.
That is my prediction, my major prediction for this year.
So I do think that it will remain civil, purely because they're of the same generation, and Verstappen's already got his first title. I know that Leclerc's going for his first one, but it is inevitable that he will get a title. If he retires with that one, God knows what's happened. But I think it will remain quite civil because they've just got respect for each other. They've just got respect to the driving styles. And there isn't any tension. No one's going for any, like, 8th world title or whatever. I don't know. I've never seen any issues apart from the karting incident. Never seen any major issues between them before. So it'll be interesting to see how tight it does get. But if we're going to go on maintaining predictions, I'm still maintaining my prediction that we'll know who's won it by the last race of the season.
No, hopefully not. But Bethany, it's been now the top two drivers that have had or have the biggest chance of winning the title have had 3 mechanical retirements between them. So I don't think that we have seen that for a very long time. I don't think we saw any mechanical retirements for the top 2 last season. The most recent ones I can think of were, I want to say 2019 or 2018 Austria, where Bottas and Hamilton both retired. 2017 Japan, where Sebastian Vettel retired. But we've seen quite good reliability, especially among the top teams over the last few years, and it's seemingly coming to an end now, with Verstappen obviously having his 2 retirements, Leclerc now having 1, and then so do you think that reliability is going to play more of a role here or in this title fight than perhaps we've seen previously?
I definitely think that it will have at least a minor impact on the title fight, but at the same time, it's going to be less of a thing as time goes on. I think it's just because these are a very radically different set of regulations, and so it's taking time for the teams to understand the cars, and as a result there's less reliability because of these regulation changes. But as time goes on and the cars get developed, the reliability will increase and there'll be less of this kind of issue. And I think that by the time it gets to the end of the season, I'll be honest, I think that reliability might not be a factor.
Yeah. Just on a side note as well, I think this is the first time that all three major engines have all had reliability issues, especially last weekend, because we had Red Bull having the 2 DNFs in the first, and Max Verstappen finishing.
I think one of the AlphaTauris DNF'd as well at Bahrain.
Yeah, and then you got Mercedes, who recently had a whole water pump issue at the end of the race, which caused them to have DNF. And plus, we did see flashes of the unreliability at the end of last year when they gave Bottas about 17 different engines in the last 10 races. And then Ferrari, obviously we saw Ferrari's first massive breakdown, which now is showing that Ferrari may have some problems with their long-term reliability for the engine, which probably may cost them later on this season. So I'll probably actually disagree, saying that at the moment reliability will be playing a big part in this role, because it doesn't seem that any team has a very reliable car at the moment.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the second drivers each. Obviously, Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz, 2 drivers who again had very contrasting races. Sainz sort of spinning off into falling back to 11th place, spinning off in the same place as Max Verstappen did, and climbing back up to what ended up being 4th, but realistically, had the Mercedes continued to be reliable, and I know it's obviously we can use the if, buts and maybes, but had they continued to be reliable, both the Mercedes would have beaten Carlos Sainz on pure pace in this race, whereas Sergio Perez maybe not could have won it, but obviously ordered to give Max Verstappen the position to let him take the lead, and obviously ending up coming in second. We'll start with Carlos Sainz, Katch. Obviously, since he has signed his new contract, it's well, and we've talked about it a lot, it's well known that his form has sort of gone off a cliff in a way, in that obviously retiring in Australia, retiring in Imola, crashing in the Imola qualifying as well, and now spinning off here, realistically never being able to challenge the Red Bulls up front. Do you think that Sainz needs, and I know we've asked it before, but it does seem to be now an ongoing thing, that Sainz isn't performing anywhere near the level he's capable of, as we saw last year?
I'm glad that you said the level he's capable of, because he is capable, and no one should even though Twitter will try to, no one should disregard him as a bad driver. He is such a good driver. There's a reason he's in a Ferrari. There's a reason why he's renewed that contract. And with these new cars, it's just tricky. I think I saw somewhere that it's a tricky car to handle, that Ferrari, and Charles is just doing a better job on it, and he's able to work with that instability when Carlos isn't as much. So he has just had bad luck. He's just been in bad form. But I have no doubt that he will be able to pick it back up. I think these I don't know, I think these mistakes are really teaching him a lot, and he'll get his win this season. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Maybe it's just that the partnership of the Red Bulls is just so strong, and they're just so much more confident that Carlos has just had his confidence knocked, and therefore he can't challenge as much. Maybe it's a big confidence thing for him. Maybe it is just that he can't handle this car as well. He's not adapting. But no one should write him off yet, because he is Carlos. He did incredible in every single car he's been in. So there's no doubt in my mind that he will pick himself back up.
And I think, Bethany, it's fair to say that we know who the number 1 and the number 2 drivers are, at least in the top 2 teams. Maybe with Mercedes, it's slightly more difficult to work out. Obviously, precedent plays a huge role there. But when you're looking at almost the perfect number 2 driver at the moment, you're almost looking at Sergio Perez as someone who has performed exceptionally well this season. You have to say, maybe last season he was not poor, but he not had a poor performance, but he was a bit sort of back there, out of reach of the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, at least. And obviously maybe that was just such the level that Hamilton and Verstappen were driving at. But this season it does almost feel like Perez can challenge especially Leclerc when something goes wrong, and perhaps even Max Verstappen, as we saw during the race. If Verstappen does have an issue, as he did with his DRS, that he ends up in the lead, and it does rely on Red Bull ordering team orders to let him pass for Verstappen to win the race, rather than Perez just being a bit slower and letting him past.
Yeah, just Perez is doing exceptionally well this year, I'd say, for Red Bull number 2. I think we can all say that the curse of the Red Bull number 2 driver has well and truly been broken by Sergio Perez, and he's doing really well this year. And he's not quite at level with Verstappen, because let's be honest, it takes a world-class drive. All the F1 drivers are world-class drivers, of course, but it takes that even more to be able to even challenge Verstappen. You cannot doubt Verstappen's talent. But even then, Sergio is doing really well compared to Verstappen, and the fact, as you said, it took team orders to get Verstappen that win shows Sergio's talent so much. I feel like that if there hadn't been team orders, then Verstappen still would have been able to get past Sergio relatively easily, just because of the pace difference. But it's not as, like, it wouldn't have been a free overtake like it would have been for, say, last year.
I think they did the team orders also maybe because they were worried about them colliding. They didn't want them to hit each other because they knew how strong Perez was, and he is strong, and I think he could have gone on to win the race. But it's so early on in the season, it just frustrates me that they've had to do team orders. This shouldn't be the case.
Exactly.
Perez is still in the title fight, even though he's not at the point scale that the other two are at. He's still close enough. He's still within it. It's the 6th race of the season. It's just unfair. It's typical of Red Bull in a way.
Yeah, if Perez had won the race, I think he would have been like 20 points behind. It would have been Leclerc in the lead of the championship still, instead of Verstappen. But Perez would only be about 20 points behind, instead of over a race win away that he is now. And remember also Saudi Arabia, when he got Poland, I think he could have pretty easily gone on to win that race as well. If he had, then he would have been right up there in the title fight.
I mean, it feels almost though Perez is also getting a bit unlucky, along with Lewis Hamilton as well. I mean, Chinmay, F1's always had an interesting history with team orders. I think you can say that all 3 of the top teams have had their past. Obviously, Russia 2017. Right,
We'll go with that.
2017 and 18 just combine in my mind into like one blob. But Russia,
we all know what you're about.
Valtteri, it's James. Obviously, Ferrari in the early 2000s being very outspoken with their team orders. I think Austria 2002, highly unnecessary team orders there. And Red Bull have obviously been giving favours, or favouring Max Verstappen for a while now. Do you think that this was too early in the championship to be implementing team orders? And do you think maybe it affects Perez's mentality in a way? Obviously, if you're being ordered to give a position to a driver, technically, obviously, Perez is probably still in the title battle, just about. And he is being ordered to let pass. It really cements, I guess, the status in his mind that he is a number 2 driver. And do you think that will have an effect on him over the next few races?
I think it will definitely start to have one, because I think Red Bull are implementing team orders this early, which I'm personally not a big fan of. It's just, I don't know why all the top teams do this. I mean, Mercedes had done it right. It was Russia 2018, I believe it was actually, because 2017 was, I think, Bottas' first win.
Oh, you're right.
So yeah. I think it was 2018, but where obviously that happened. Ferrari's done it multiple times before. I just wanted to sign up for that. It's just my favourite one was I think it was in 2012 where the F1 was being pretty strict with the orders. I think
it was 2010.
2010.
I think team orders were still banned.
Yeah, team orders were banned, and then literally as a so-called coded message Ferrari said to Felipe Massa, "Fernando is faster than you. Can you confirm you understand this message?" I'm like,
it's just is there not is there not a more coded way to do it? Just do strap 48 or something.
Yeah.
And where it's not actually a strap, but it's just let your teammate past.
Yeah, it's just typical Ferrari. But
I mean, that is a good question actually. Obviously, we've seen in the past that team orders have been banned. Do you think we need to return to it? I can't remember why they were unbanned. I'm not sure. I think it was just generally
From what I understand, I think they were unbanned just because the ban was unenforceable.
I can imagine that's the case.
Yeah, but do you think that... Because Ferrari never really got penalised that heavily for what they did in... I think it was Hockenheim 2010. They never really got penalised for it. So do you think that it would be interesting to see the ban reinstated with actual penalties for teams that are... Realistically, it can be proven that team orders has taken place. Do you think that the ban needs to be reintroduced to just make it a bit more racy?
I don't know if there needs to be a ban introduced. I just think that it needs to be stricter. It needs to... I think you need to question the teams on why they're doing this. Is it unnecessary? In this case, with Spain, it was unnecessary, I think. There was no need for there to be team orders for Perez to give way to Verstappen. So in that case, there shouldn't be a ban, but the race directors and the stewards could be like, hey, Red Bull, why is this happening? Why have you done this? Because it does impact on the fans' experience in a way, because they'll just see drivers give way. It happened a lot with Mercedes all the time, and it's just unfair, and it creates a title fight with less people involved. I think that if team orders didn't occur, you may have 3 or 4 drivers involved in a title fight, which is more exciting for the fans, it's more exciting for the teams. It's just better for everyone. It's better for F1.
Yeah, I think going back to that Ferrari, I think if I remember correctly, is you probably remember the whole Spygate issue, McLaren obviously copying Ferrari, they get disqualified, they get $100 million fine. I think Ferrari only got penalised €100,000, which was what they were paying Fernando Alonso every single day.
I think Ferrari didn't really do anything wrong. It was McLaren that sort of nicked their designs. So
no, of course it was a big thing, but
sorry, you meant for the team orders.
For the team orders, Ferrari only got fined
$100,000,
which is literally what they paid Alonso every day in that during those days. But
so do you think team orders should be banned again, or what do you like? Do you think they're just part of the sport? I think
now that it's just a part of the sport, because I think if it was to be banned, like I said, it would just make things needlessly complicated to enforce. It would just cause a lot more confusion, I think, and I think it's just going to be around now. I don't think there's any point in banning it without too much confusion being made.
Yeah, I agree. And in my mind, the main problem is, as soon as one team starts doing it, then it puts every other team at a massive disadvantage if they don't do it, and therefore it just, I don't know how to explain it. Just as soon as one team does it, then it's incentivizing all the other teams to do it, because
it's precedent. I see what you're saying, that if, for example, we'll go with this season, if Red Bull did team orders like they did, and they put Verstappen above Perez, they could put most of their resources into Verstappen in a title fight. But let's say Ferrari doesn't. They're now having to split resources, split strategy to get, because both people are in the title fight. So it will just mean that we'll end up with, I don't know, I get what you're saying though, it will disadvantage the other teams. That's the word.
Yeah, and it remains to be seen. I guess we'll bring it back to Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc quickly. Obviously, Verstappen suffering from a DRS issue, but still ending up with the race win. I think we mentioned before, obviously, how Charles Leclerc probably would have been on for the win had Verstappen not had, or had he not had the issue. But do you think, can anyone stop Max Verstappen at the moment? Because if Leclerc drops out, it is just a Verstappen win, and if Verstappen drops out, it is just the Leclerc win. Do you think we're going to get do you think it's going to be very similar to what we saw last season? But if we don't see the collisions, it could just end up being Leclerc and Verstappen winning all of the races this season. I mean, do you think that's possible, or do you think we're going to get like a Britain or an Italy, a race where they collide and something incredible happens?
I don't even think it needs to be a collision. I think qualifying will play such a massive role in a lot of tracks, and wet weather will. You can see a lot in qualifying and in races. Wet weather races do produce mad ones. They produce drivers that take wins that you may not expect to. So I think we'll see some other winners 100%. I can see Perez winning a couple of races. Carlos will win a race. You might see Mercedes winning a few. I think we will see some more mad situations as other teams get the upgrades they want, come into the title fight. And I don't know, I guess with the resources, the cost cap towards the end of the season, maybe the top teams, even though they'll have a really developed car, they may have run out of money to produce a lot of upgrades, while teams that are further towards the middle and the back may just have these major upgrades, see what happened, wait right until the end, and then suddenly, I don't know, go win all the last races. You don't know.
We are on our penultimate section as we dive into the rest of the grid and how they did. Starting off with, it's fair to say, I think, the best performer, arguably, of the season outside the top three teams. Not even arguably, it is the best performer, or he is the best performer of the season so far outside the top three teams. Valtteri Bottas. He's just having It's again, Bottas is very much like Gasly last season. You can't really tell how good he's doing because Joe's got very unlucky so far this season. I think he's had 2 mechanical retirements, 1 crash in Imola that sort of put him out of contention. But Bottas has done exceptionally well. He's always been up there. And, I mean, Chinmay, do you think it's the car or do you think it's the driver or do you think it's a bit of both?
Bit of both. I think the Alpha is actually a fast car, and don't forget, Joe is still a rookie. He's not had a lucky season so far. And yes, and don't forget, he did actually have a points finish on his debut race. He did finish P10. So I think Alpha is just. I think Alfa Romeo this year is definitely the dark horse on the grid. It's like, and then just Vespa, just Valtteri just casually out qualifying the Mercedes more than once this year already, and just. You just can't get more Valtteri Bottas than that, to be honest.
I mean, would you say... So we've said, obviously, Verstappen's maybe having the best season. George Russell's up there. Charles Leclerc, without his mistake in Imola, is definitely up there. I mean, do you think Bottas is also up there, Bethany? Do you think that he is having one of the best seasons? Without his DNF in Saudi Arabia, he would have finished in the points in all races, which in a midfield car is quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, he's having a really good season. I would say that he still needs to work on his defending a bit. But other than that, I think he's having a very, very good season. And I wouldn't say he's quite up there as the best, as a contender for the best season of the grid this year. But he's close, certainly.
I think if he gets a podium or something, then maybe he could be up there. But I'm not putting him in the top group yet. I think he's defo best of the rest. There's no debate about that. But he's doing really well, and I think we're also judging his season based on the fact that A, he was in a Mercedes last year, and B, that everyone is possibly still rating the Alfa Romeo as like a bad car. So everyone may be thinking that he's outperforming the Alfa Romeo incredibly, but it is a good car. I don't know where it's at. I'd say it's about 5th best, maybe 5th, 6th, but he's doing really well, and he's getting regularly into Q3, and he's having a good, solid season like Pierre Gasly was last year.
Yeah, and I'll go to Bethany.
Yeah, and only other thing I wanted to mention, I feel like he's definitely had a confidence boost moving to Alfa Romeo, I feel. Just he's stepped out of the shadow of Lewis Hamilton, and I think that's done him wonders.
So we'll wait and see how Bottas does. We'll move on to another individual driver quickly, just before we talk about one other team that did particularly well this race. And Katch, I'll let you take it away, because you know who I'm talking about. It's Lando Norris coming from 11th to 8th, but maybe explain to people that don't know why that's possibly a very, very good result.
Yeah, it's an incredible result. So he has been feeling poorly all weekend. This is all just like said on Twitter and on what McLaren has said. But yeah, he's been feeling really poorly all year, or all weekend. He's had really bad hay fever. I think everyone gets it, especially in Spain at the moment. It's really severe. There's a lot of pollen around. So he's facing bad hay fever. He didn't do any media stuff, I think, immediately after qualifying. He missed a lot of media. He was in a dark room quite a lot, because he did the whole race with tonsillitis, with bad hay fever and tonsillitis. I actually had tonsillitis a couple of weeks back. Was horrific. Did not enjoy. I think he had it a lot worse, to be fair. But can you imagine driving like over 100 miles per hour consistently with tonsillitis, with hay fever, maybe not being able to see very well, like having really complicated? It's ridiculous. Like, the fact that these are athletes that are just they're putting themselves in such danger, and they're going out with illnesses, with colds, with Lewis last year with long COVID and other aspects like that. Or was it last year or the year before?
2020.
2020,
yeah.
With long COVID. Yeah, so it's just a mega result, I think. And it just, the fact that he got points as well kind of shows that he is, without bad luck, he's there. That McLaren isn't incredible. Their upgrades didn't work as well as people were hoping. I think people expected, because McLaren bought a list of like 10 upgrades, they expected the car to be up there with the Mercedes. It's not, and that's okay. It's like a solid midfield car, and he's just outperforming, and he's doing super well. So hopefully he's able to rest before Monaco, and I don't know, everyone's fit and healthy, and that he has a good chill week, relaxing.
I mean, I know how useless I am when I'm ill, and I can't imagine driving an F1 car. I think back to 2007 in Fuji when Mark Webber had food poisoning, and I think there was a radio clip of him literally throwing up in his helmet. Chinmay, do you think that you could do something like that? And how impressive do you think that it is that he was able to not only finish the race, but go from 11th on the grid up to 8th, and get 4 probably quite crucial points for the McLaren team?
No, it was pretty impressive. Like I said, it's just, you have tonsillitis, you got hay fever. I've had that sort of stuff before. I mean, not really hay fever, but tonsillitis is just not nice. You can't talk, it pretty just ruins your whole mood, you can't do anything.
You struggle to drink as well. I remember when I had it, I really struggled to swallow. Like, I could barely drink water. And the fact that you're so dehydrated in 30-degree heat?
Yeah, I remember I just literally I had to have very much rice just for a whole week. But yeah, just put it into context, I'm like, it's pretty impressive that he's still able to drive that McLaren and bring it to 8th place. And McLaren is the fastest car on the grid. I mean, it is pretty much where it is relative to the whole grid right now, with that 8th and 12th with Lando and Ricciardo. I don't think they've done anything extra special, but I think Lando just being ill and doing that sort of performance, it's a good commandment.
Yeah, just I can't really say more than that. Just, it must have been I don't know how Lando's feeling now, but I assume he's still recovering. And
I'm assuming he's back in Monaco just resting.
yeah, just hope he
the life.
hope he recovers quickly.
Oh, no. I do want to mention about Danny though, because we said that Lando made up places. Danny couldn't. I don't know if he made up like 2 places maybe, but
I think he lost. He finished 12th off a 9th place start.
Oh yeah, he was 9th. Exactly. I think I'm not questioning. No one should be legitimately questioning his place in F1 at all. He is such a good driver, and he's been there on merit. This race now makes him the most experienced Australian driver ever. He's overtaken Mark Webber now with a number of races, but there has to be a form. There's something that is up. It's not with his car. It's something maybe up with his confidence, with his performance. Something has to change, because I hope that the McLaren team can be up there, maybe get 4th or 5th in constructors. I don't know, but I don't know. His performances haven't been to what we expect from Daniel Ricciardo, so we'll see where he goes in the next few weeks. But Monaco's a track that he's usually all right at. He won. He nearly won. He does well. We're ignoring last year. That doesn't count. Apart from that season, he's been good. So we'll see where he's at in Monaco, because I think he should be able to be Q3, I hope.
I mean, and another team that had 2 good finishes, actually, maybe not quite the qualifying performance that they wanted, was Alpine. Esteban Ocon continues to make me dislike him, as he continues to make my second fantasy team better than my first one.
Oh no.
It's very annoying.
Can you just change your main fantasy team?
No, but I know as soon as I take out all the drivers that are doing well, or add the ones that are doing well in, they'll instantly start doing well.
I regret not adding Russell. Russell's doing so well.
No, that's why. That's my second one has Russell, Ocon, and Albon in it. It's ridiculously good, and it's got Red Bull as the car. It's just a bit annoying, and I don't like it.
Sucks to be you.
There are worse problems to have. I finished 85th this week out of everyone in Spain. It was terrible.
I don't know about Spain. My Spain was really bad.
I had Magnussen.
Spain without the S.
Yeah, exactly.
Please.
I had Magnussen and Leclerc. It just wasn't fun.
Same.
But back to topic. Alpine. You'd have to say probably they're the 5th best car, and Ocon again having a very good performance. I mean, do you think they're just operating in sort of that midfield position, and it might come down to, or it's seemingly going to come down to McLaren versus Alpine versus Alfa Romeo for that 4th place in the Constructors' Championship?
Yeah, 100%. It's maybe McLaren is the distant contender right now, especially because their position on the grid, I don't know, I find it's quite ambiguous. But I think definitely between Alfa or Valtteri Bottas versus Alpine is definitely on the cards for 4th race finish right now. That'll be it. It'll be all down to the mid-season development now.
Go on, Bottas. But I mean, what did you think of the Alpine's performance? Were you surprised maybe that they were so not slow in qualifying, but off the pace, and then maybe, or were you surprised that they did so well in the race?
I'm slightly surprised at how they did in the race, but at the same time, you could see, there were many times when you could see just Alonso was slowly moving up the grid. He was the focus quite a lot of the time when he was making those moves. But at the same time, the Alpines kind of just, Ocon especially, was just a bit silently going up the grid, like Hamilton was as well. Just silently going about their business, moving up the grid, and just surprise result at the end. A bit like Sainz had done quite a lot last year.
Yeah, Ocon's been really impressive. I think this race, the difference between Ocon and Alonso was the upgrades. Ocon was given upgrades, Alonso wasn't. And that did show that development is going in the right direction for Alpine, and they will be able to improve once they give those developments and upgrade to Alonso. Everyone knows Alonso's capable. He'll be able to move up. I think we can see both Alpines in Q3 quite a lot at the moment. It will definitely be interesting between the 3 teams that you mentioned, McLaren and Alfa Romeo, Alpine. For Q3, will be very tight between those 3, and just on constructors' points, that's why every single point is so vital, and you need every single driver in the competition. So I think for midfield, up front and at the back, there's so tight challenges, and I love that we're seeing this season with these new cars.
Yeah, I mean, it's McLaren are on 50 points at the moment, Alfa Romeo on 39, and Alpine 5 points back on 34, so it's looking like a close one, and it could come down to those not freak podiums, but those just podiums here and there, like McLaren got in Imola, that could decide it all. Has anyone got any other drivers they want to shout out? I don't think.
I do want to just mention Albon, because no one covered it. Not by no one I mean Williams and F1, that Albon did have floor damage for that whole race. That's why he was 40 seconds back from Latifi. Albon is still better than Latifi. But yeah,
controversial statement.
I don't think
no one disagrees.
No one disagrees.
Yeah, I don't think so anyone's going to argue.
But yeah, he had floor damage,
okay.
So that's why.
The red hair finally didn't pay off. Any others? I feel like Haas just had a mediocre race. They had a very good qualifying.
Yeah.
Magnussen just got unlucky. This didn't really get unlucky at the start. It was his fault, but
was it on pace that Mick couldn't keep in the points? Because at one point Mick was running P6, I saw.
Yeah, I think the tyre just dropped off quite significantly at the end. He was literally just a sitting duck on the straight.
Yeah,
So-
I am hoping he gets points soon, because he does deserve them.
he will. It will be like a George Russell. As soon as he gets 1 point, he'll start getting a few more point scoring finishes. But we are going to end it there with our coverage of the race. Actually, we've forgotten to do the part we normally do at the start, give the race a rating out of 10.
Ooh.
So I'm going to come round to all my guests quickly, and quickly they can give me their rating out of 10. Chimay, why don't we start with you?
I'll go for 6.
6?
6 and a half.
That's quite hard.
Six and a half.
harsh.
6 and a half. 6 and a half.
Okay.
I just no, because the race can be so much better if the track has one modification.
Yep.
Is to get rid of the freaking final chicane at the end of the track. I hate that chicane that much. If it wasn't for that chicane, that race will be about 10 times better. That's the reason why I'm being harsh. But otherwise, unexpectedly good race.
6.5 from Chimay, Bethany.
I'll be honest, I feel like the race might have actually been more boring without the chicane. I know, controversial, but I feel like there would have been much more overtakes earlier, and then it would have been much more boring later on if it wasn't for if the chicane wasn't there. But for the race itself, I really thought it was really good. The only boring part that I can remember, as I mentioned earlier, was the final 4 laps. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Ooh, 9 out of 10. That's quite high.
I was going to go with an 8. I think an 8 is... I enjoyed it. There was things going on throughout the race, and yeah, the last 4 laps were a bit boring. But no, there was a lot of drama. So yeah, an 8 I think is a good solid race. It's one of the best races this season. I think it can be beaten, definitely, because it's the Spain track. But yeah, I think an 8.
Ooh, I think I'll go for a 7.5. It had a few unique aspects. Obviously, DRS not working on Verstappen and Sainz both going off through, I guess, no fault of anyone else. But had some good results. I think it could be one of those ones where it's like the beginning of something, especially when Mercedes coming back, and obviously Lewis Hamilton having a very good drive that he compared to maybe even more than a win. But obviously that ends our Spanish Grand Prix coverage review if you will. We will take one final break, and we will come back after the break, look at our predictions, which as we said at the start of the show, were not very good for the Spanish Grand Prix, and also make and preview the predictions for the Monaco Grand Prix coming up in a week's time. And we are back for the final segment of the Warwick F1 show, looking at our predictions for the Spanish Grand Prix. And apparently they weren't very good.
Well, we didn't do as well as we would because Leclerc's engine decided it didn't want to go to the end of the race again. So
what did we go for in the end then?
So we actually had very similar podiums. So I actually went for Leclerc, Verstappen and Sainz.
Okay.
And you went for Leclerc, Sainz and Verstappen. So we both got 1 point.
Yeah, that's just 1 point.
So, and by the way, going to this weekend, we're actually tying on points.
Are we tying on points now?
I think we're 17. We're 17-0.
Ooh.
Spain.
Ooh, exciting.
Ooh. Okay.
So it changes a bit here. So my 1 pointer was a Mercedes Q3.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a 1 point for me. And then you put Alonso beat Ocon in the race, but I think Ocon
No, Ocon beat Alonso.
beat him. But then I went for a Alonso top 6, which obviously came 9th.
Yeah.
And you put Alonso gets another top 5, so you get 2 points for that. So it's 3 points, 2 points. 3 points, so you 2 points for me.
3-2.
And then our 3 pointers, I put a Haas double points finish, but that didn't happen.
Neither got points.
Neither. And then you put a Williams and Aston points finish.
Yeah,
So,
Neither.
So to me, Vettel was close.
Vettel was close.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
No, Albon was
We were not very
and
good.
Latifi is just not
Latifi's Latifi.
Huge dub for Latifi.
So I think it will be going into.
So I'm a point ahead now.
So yeah, 2019.
Ooh.
So yeah,
Bit of a forgettable year for F1, that one. 2019.
that's true.
Obviously, we'll quickly preview the Monaco Grand Prix. The duel in F1's crown, but it's a very divisive duel in a way. Obviously, last season, it's fair to say that was probably one of the worst races we've ever seen ever. No,
I haven't
Not
watched
as-
many Monaco races, but I enjoyed it because of a Lando podium.
there was
and Carlos
one.
podium.
There was one. Was there even one on track
No,
overtake?
no.
There was one that was interrupted
Yeah.
by Lance Stroll.
There was
It was
one.
Vettel's move on Gasly or
There
something
was
like that.
one that
Or
we
the other one.
didn't. The only on-track overtake that happened, we didn't see. That just sums up that
I
race.
just realised
That's
we have Monaco TV direction next week. So
Oh no!
I just realised that as well.
The TV direction this week wasn't actually that bad. The drone,
No, it was actually really
they
good.
need to hire better drone operators. That's all I'm saying.
No, they just need a better drone.
They do need a
They
better
need to up the budget on that. That was literally one of those £5 drones you get in Tesco. They were using.
Genuinely.
But we will wait and see. Obviously, with the rain that could potentially be coming, as of recording, 40% chance of rain on the Saturday. Probably, and I cannot speak for a second. And I think it's going to peak around when qualifying would actually take place. So obviously you got to look you look at the
Exciting.
hours. Obviously it's Monday. That's on Saturday. The weather does change in 5 days. But
Really?
more. I know it's
So surprising.
It's just
I
like
know.
Weather changes
idea.
well, at least over here, weather changes in 10 minutes.
Yep.
Genuinely.
Welcome to England. But more crucially, on the Sunday, it's looking fairly consistent rain throughout the day. And especially, it's when it's the showers, I always find. It's when the showers come in.
Suddenly hit for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's wet in one part, dry in the other. Maybe that's a bit less at Monaco, because obviously the track is so small. Obviously, shortest circuit on the calendar, second shortest in terms of lap time. But we will wait and see, and hopefully it can finally be a good race at Monaco. And obviously, as ever, we have made our predictions for what we think is going to happen in the Monaco Grand Prix. We will go through our podiums and obviously a 1 point, a 2 point, and a 3 point prediction for the event, or for an event that will take place throughout the weekend. Now, Chimay, do you want to read out your podium? I know we were saying during the break we were both having the same thoughts.
Yeah, I've gone. By the way, this week I'm not expecting any points because I've just gone completely out the blue. Because I thought, because last few weeks I was not live and pretty safe with a lot of my predictions, so I went completely out the blue. I actually went for Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton. I'm predicting Leclerc to break his Monaco streak this weekend. Even though I thought Jinxon, he is probably going to crash a turn and in lap 3 or something. But yeah, what did you go for?
We have pure faith in
Yeah.
the fact that Leclerc won't finish.
If he finishes outside the top 3.
Yeah, but we've gone for Verstappen, Sainz, and Hamilton. I think Hamilton's due a podium. I think, especially if he'd not got unlucky in Spain, he would have probably got one there. And especially if that Mercedes is looking like the better car, or a better car, then he might be on the podium in third. But who knows? Obviously, if it rains, you've got Verstappen, you've got Hamilton. Even further back, you've got Lance Stroll, people like that, who are good in the... I've just clocked. Rain plus Monaco means Latifi is not finishing this race.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So
Would he finish the race anyway?
he might. He finished
No,
last
So
year.
unlikely.
No, he would.
Well, we'll see how that goes, and then I think maybe a bet on a DNF for Latifi, depending on what the weather's looking like on race day, might be a good one. But what are your... We'll start with the 1 point predictions. What have you gone for?
I'm just put Russell continues his top 5 streak.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That was a 2 point for us, but I think no one really thought it was going to keep going. But I think saying that's a 1 point now is probably fair. He's really improved,
Let's
and if
change
the
that.
Mercedes are improving as well. I think that's fair. We've gone for Bottas starts on the first 3 rows, so 6th or better. We back Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And
And that's after penalties.
Yeah.
Imagine if Bottas gets a grid penalty now.
Oh, it's going to happen. And it's just how it works. But
He'll start top 3 rows. I have faith in the
we
guy.
have faith in our Finnish legend. Right, what's your 2 points?
Leclerc does not crash in the race.
In the race, okay. No, I'll accept that.
Specifically race.
Yes.
Specifically crash.
Yes.
Okay, so he retires on lap 1 because the tyres haven't been put on.
I won't be surprised.
We've gone for less than 5 on-track overtakes.
Yeah.
So not in the pits.
Actually,
how are we designating punctures? Let's say someone puts it in the wall. Does that count?
That's a crash.
Yes. So what? No. Someone puts it like. Do you remember Hamilton 2008? He put it in the wall but kept going, managed to get back.
Right.
Is an overtake due to that, an on-track overtake? Let's just set out the boundaries now. I'd say no.
I'd say no.
I'd say no.
On-track overtakes on merit. Maybe.
Have we ever...
It has to be between 2 cars that are genuinely capable of racing each other.
Yeah. Okay. Less than 5 on-track overtakes.
And I don't mean a Red Bull that is pitted. A Red Bull that is pitted overtaking a Williams that hasn't still counts as on
that's
able
fine.
to capable of
cars,
racing each other.
Cars that are overtaken are both working.
Yes.
As they're designed, right? And what is your 3-pointer?
Perez and Sainz crash into each other.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Does that contradict your podium? Have you covered it, or have you just got?
No, he went Leclerc.
I went Leclerc.
Oh, he doesn't even. He's going fully in. I'd say if one of us gets all of these right one day, it's going to be absolute scenes.
Chaos.
We have gone for 12 or less finishes.
Wow, that's a lot of DNFs.
We have made that
Monaco 1996.
If it's going to be rain,
yes, that's all.
There's got to be non-finishers, and Leclerc didn't even start last year, so we could have 1 or 2.
Exactly. We have been very clever here by saying finishers as opposed to DNFs, because a DNS is not a DNF, and so is a DSQ. No, DSQ.
Shut up.
I'd argue that DNS is a DNF because if you don't start it, you don't finish.
True. Does that mean I've DNF'd every F1 race?
Yes. You're that bad.
Well, wow. I'm being savage. You're not getting invited back.
Freaking, not just taking shots.
And this is Katch's last show. If you liked her as a guest, you will never see her again. No, we'll have you back.
That's a bit rude.
We'll have you back. And that has been at the end of the show. We're coming up to the final hour. Do any of my guests have something they want to say? Katch, you can only say nice things.
I don't know what to say.
There is nothing nice you can say.
I think the Monaco Grand Prix will be a good race. I hope it's a bad race because I can't watch it, but it will be a good race. I think.
I don't have faith. And maybe if it rains, I'll have a bit more faith.
Have faith in Monaco. The track's cool.
All right. Anyone else?
I think it's just going to be chaos. I'm looking forward to it, but at the same time I feel like there is going to be elements of it's going to be boring because it's Monaco. The cars aren't good in slow corners. It's going to be very interesting to see how they deal with it.
No, we're just going to see Lance Stroll driving over random curbs again. Overtake Gasly, so.
You know, they're going to mention that. That would have been such a solid 1-pointer, I actually just thought. The comment, Crofty mentions the Lance Stroll highlight incident. So, that has been the Warwick F1 show. These have been my guests, Chinmay, Bethany and Katch. And thank you for listening.